Today I want to start by telling you guys a story of a client of mine who applied for naturalization the last time that Trump was president. Let's call him Bob. So Bob is from Ecuador and he became a permanent resident through marriage in 2001. Around 2018, he wants to apply for naturalization, and he does so by himself without an attorney. He did a fine job on the naturalization application. He didn't make any mistakes. Back then, the application was only 5 pages. Now it's more than 20 pages. But the substance hasn't actually changed that much. So he submits the application, and about a year later, he's still waiting for his swearing-in ceremony. He attended his citizenship test. He passed it. He speaks almost perfect English. He passed the civics and history test, did his biometrics. Everything seems to be normal, but there's no swearing-in ceremony. So he comes to me, and I don't exactly know why it's taking so long. So I submit a couple inquiries to USCIS. About 9 months later, we receive a notice to appear in immigration court. And it turns out that he was now being placed into deportation proceedings. And that brings us to today's topic, the Freedom of Information Act request and how it can improve the chances of being granted naturalization. So it turns out that Bob became a permanent resident in 2001 through marriage, but he was a conditional resident and he never properly filed Form I-751. Instead, he filed an I-90 to renew his conditional green card, and through USCIS error, he was granted a 10-year green card, and then he subsequently renewed the green card. USCIS never caught the error until it was time for him to naturalize. USCIS realizes that he failed to file Form I-751 2 years after he got his green card, so he would have had to file it around 2003. And now their position is that my friend Bob is no longer a permanent resident because his status was technically terminated in 2003. And you might be wondering, how was his status terminated in 2003 if USCIS kept renewing his green card and giving him 10-year green cards after that? Great question, but USCIS doesn't care when you point that out. Their position now is that Bob's status was terminated as of 2003, and now he is deportable, and he was effectively placed into deportation proceedings as a result of submitting that N-400 naturalization application. So now we are in deportation proceedings. Bob thought that by submitting his naturalization application, he could become a US citizen and finally put an end to his immigration journey and enjoy all the fruits of becoming a US citizen. But he actually ended up in deportation proceedings. And luckily, this story has a happy ending. We were able to terminate his removal proceedings and then subsequently reapply for naturalization. And today, Bob is a US citizen, and he actually was able to subsequently petition for his spouse to become a permanent resident. So this time, it was a happy story, but it's not always a happy story. And you might be wondering, how did USCIS catch this error so many years later? Why didn't they catch it sooner? What happens is when you apply for naturalization, USCIS does one of the most intense background checks they will ever complete on you. It'll be more thorough than the background checks that were completed when you initially became a permanent resident. In fact, I cannot tell you how many times over the last few years I've seen people come in with a denial on their N-400 naturalization application. And in the decision, it explains that the person was improperly granted permanent residence. And I've seen this happen because there are permanent bar issues, somebody was criminally inadmissible for other reasons, fraud, or they triggered a 10-year bar and they weren't eligible for residency at that time. I've seen a whole lot of reasons why people are ineligible for naturalization, but the worst thing that could possibly happen as a result is you could be placed into removal proceedings, and now you are at risk of losing your permanent residence. So what can you do to reduce the chances of this happening? The thing that I really like to do is to submit a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request, to all of the applicable government agencies that might have information about your immigration filings in the past. So for example, if you became a permanent resident by adjusting status inside the United States, I would submit a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, to USCIS. If you did it a long time ago, I would do it to INS, which was the legacy, the predecessor to USCIS. And then we would get a copy of every single form and document that you or your prior attorneys submitted to USCIS so that you can become a permanent resident. We can scour all this information looking for mistakes, omissions, or to see if USCIS possibly made a mistake when they granted you your permanent residency. Now, this is more necessary when you have a complicated immigration history. If your case was very straightforward and you know for sure no mistakes were made along the way, you actually have a copy of everything you previously submitted to USCIS, or you used an attorney who you trust, this might not be necessary. It might just be a waste of time. But if you're unsure, doing a Freedom of Information Act request could be the difference between becoming a US citizen and ending up in removal proceedings. As the background checks and vetting become more intense and scrutiny increases, the burden on you to make sure that you are eligible for naturalization increases because the consequences increase. So I'm just gonna end the video by saying, I didn't intend to scare anybody by explaining what the possible risks are. It's no secret by now that Trump is not only trying to reduce illegal immigration, but he's actually trying to reduce the total number of legal immigrants as well. So if you need any assistance with your immigration process, or you're considering applying for naturalization or going through the permanent resident green card process, you can schedule a consultation directly with me. I would love to speak to you about your case, help you create a strategy, and if you'd like, I can also represent you in your case from start to finish until you achieve the outcome you're looking for. If you guys are new to my channel, subscribe. I put out several videos a week on family-based immigration, naturalization, and policy changes under the Trump administration. And I'll see you guys next time for another video.